A good day to y'all. My name is Lucas, and in this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Robert Kaithern. Robert is a filmmaker, a photographer, and a storyteller. And I basically learned about Robert when I was preparing for my conversation with Emily from Mud Hut Illustration. Now, Robert had a podcast up on Spotify, which he has since taken down. He's starting a new one soon. And in one of those episodes, he spoke to Emily. And first of all, what I noticed is that Robert has a beautiful voice. I thought he might work for Audible or one of those companies that does audiobooks because it sounded weirdly familiar and it sounds like a voice that I could listen to for a long time. And today I did. I spent 2 hours with him. Partially that was offline as I shared a bit of my story with him so he understood who he was talking to. And then, I sat back and listened for most of the time, and I hope you guys do too. I think Robert is someone to learn from. Robert is someone that is extremely good at storytelling, and especially his own story. I think he's done a really good job of telling and highlighting lessons. He is very good at articulating things that he has learned, and I think that humility is a word that comes up when I listen to Robert. I think he's applied this to his life, and it's something that I aim for, strive for, and pray for in my life. Yeah, I don't want to say too much more because I think this conversation is going to speak for itself. I will re-listen to it multiple times, I'm sure, as I took so many lessons from it, and I hope you guys do too. I hope you have a wonderful day, week, month, year, life, and I'll see you for the next one.
The earliest memories I have of creative art, beauty, anything that I was really drawn to was growing up in the country in New Jersey, surrounded by farmland. But I was reading like illustrated editions of King Arthur and Robin Hood. So I'd always go out in the backyard and like hit trees with sticks and pretend that I was like jousting,
Yeah.
like in some kind of medieval battle. Uh, And at the same time, like this is when Batman the animated series was on TV. So I would just climb a tree and pretend I was watching over Gotham City kind of thing. And most of my memories from my childhood were all about trying to write stories and also just imagining things in the backyard. Because we didn't really grow up with TV. We did not have cable. Uh, I'm one of 6 kids. So I would try to force my sisters to play with me. you know uh, so it was a heavy imagination, like lots of imagination and chores outside and a very small kind of community related to the church I was raised in.
Hmm.
But anything that my babysitter would bring over, like whether it was comic books or like an illustrated version of The Hobbit, anything that had knights in armor or like heroic chivalry, all of that stuff just always grabbed my attention. So any book I could read, I was constantly getting in trouble for reading instead of doing chores,
Mm.
which is where I learned the sins of omission versus the sins of commission, because I would get in trouble for not doing things, not
Yeah.
for actually doing anything wrong. Uh, but yeah, didn't really know anything about how to tell a story, and because I was kind of getting in trouble for not being able to focus, I got pulled out of school to be homeschooled around, I think, fifth grade. Yeah, it was fifth grade, which for me was amazing because then I could just read all the books. But it also puts you in this weird kind of place, unless there's a real commitment to having a community or to socializing with other kids. There's no reason to. So I could spend all my time just reading books and imagining that I was like a samurai or imagining that I was on a ship, like really enjoyed Captain's Courageous by Rudyard Kipling. Really like Jack London, those kind of like boys' adventure stories. And but a lot of that was, just kind of consumption. I'm just going to keep reading, keep reading. Every time I wrote something, it would be just a brutal knockoff of anything. Like, oh, I'm going to write a sci-fi short story. okay, there are these bad guys dressed in white, and then there's a guy with a laser sword, and then there, you know, like
Yeah.
it was always really, really bad. Um, yeah, but that was I always kind of felt this yearning for, I would say, like I wanted stone buildings. I wanted stained glass windows.
Mm.
You know, I wanted a quest. I wanted all those things you get from King Arthur. And I was raised in a Presbyterian church, which is just white walls and a guy standing up there preaching to you. And it's heavily intellectual. And I was always really disappointed that I couldn't go pray in a beautiful chapel before going out to confront the Black Knight or something like that, you know. Um, so by the time I got to college, and I did not want to go to college, I was a miserable, depressed, intellectual little kid. Went to college, and I got hit with the full force of the new atheist movement, because that's right when Dawkins came out with like the God Delusion. There was a bunch of other books at that point. I can't remember exactly what they were all called, but so everyone my age was quoting all of the new atheists, and my childhood Presbyterian theological framework couldn't withstand that attack at all. And I was kind of bewildered the whole time. So even when I took a New Testament class, I took an Old Testament class, and same thing, deconstructivism. The whole thing was about tearing it down and showing you how it wasn't true and how it was all fabricated. So when you're, you know, 17 years old in a completely different state, and your entire worldview is getting decimated, and you're supposed to do something. So I'm like, I was grasping. So the first thing I kind of latched onto was Asian studies. So my professor, my advisor, this is the most probably devout religious man I've ever met. He's a Muslim from India, but you know, and I was his assistant actually. So 5 times a day he's praying. So I would come to his office and I'd see him on his prayer mat, you know, praying towards Mecca. I remember thinking like, why don't Christians do that?
Mm.
You know, like there seems to be a little bit more piety here than what I was raised with. And but he taught an Asian tradition class. He taught Asian economic theory. He taught um, what else did he teach? I took all of his classes basically because he had spent a lot of time in Japan. But I was learning about Asian religion. I then moved into studying Asian philosophy in the philosophy department, and then I realized I need to study philosophy because I don't really want to deal with this religion stuff anymore. There has to be an intellectual answer to all my questions. And then around my junior year, I realized I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went on a film shoot with my friend who was going to Temple Film School. And it was like a 10-hour day. And I just thought, people do this for a living? Like, sign me up. Like, I would love, you know, the whole process was so cool. But I was stuck at a tiny school in Virginia. And my mom basically said, no, finish your degree and then you'll figure it out. I said, okay. So I took, at that point, all my electives switched to being acting, directing,
Mm.
playwriting, anything with storytelling. And then this like wave of just like, I need to watch every possible movie I can. And of course, when you're in college, you got to watch Tarantino, you know, you got to watch Robert Rodriguez, you got to watch all like the bad boys, you know, whatever is cool at that time. But the college I went to had a program where you got credit for going to see plays, going to see art films, and going to visiting museums. So I went to every theater production that was free for students. I went to every art film that was free for students, and I went to every museum gallery presentation. So even though I wasn't in an art school, I was at a liberal arts school rather. Um, I force fed myself as much art and culture as I possibly could. So when I graduated, you know, my professors were like, hey, you know, you got to go to graduate school. You got to become a professor. You got to, you know, academia. And I wanted nothing to do with it. Like, absolutely, like, get me out of here. I want to do real things in the real world. I want to make movies. I want to be around the arts. And, but I didn't have a plan. So, you know, fell flat on my face, just like, and I was fortunate that I had have a sister who was in the restaurant industry. And she just said, okay, you should just get a job at a restaurant and just do that. So I worked in restaurants. I mean, I got out of college and it was just the restaurant industry, just like full blast. And you do meet a lot of creative people in the restaurant industry, but you meet a lot of frustrated creatives.
Mm.
You meet the actors who are desperate to get that gig. You meet artists who do really good work but can't finish anything. You meet managers who studied theater or were some in the arts somehow, or like a musician, but they weren't making enough money and they wanted a family. So they decided, okay, at least I have health benefits here. I can take care of my family. So there's this general undercurrent of frustration, not to mention a lot of substance abuse, like heavy drinking, the whole party thing. Because if you work in a restaurant and you make enough money and you're making a lot of cash, the party doesn't have to stop.
Yeah.
You can just keep going. And if you're young and you can recover from those things, then you don't care. And you're blowing your money, you don't care about the future. So it was a really strange kind of cauldron of both inspiration and desperation and general just kind of malaise when you're in that world. And I was in that world, I'm still kind of in that world to a degree, but um, I never stopped trying to do creative things. So every time someone said, "Hey, you want to do this little project?" I would just say yes for no money. Like the first thing I did was a guitarist at the restaurant I worked at had a new single he had recorded. And I said, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you. Let me do a music video." And he said, "Okay." And he brought in season one of The OC on DVD. I don't know if you're aware of this show in America. It was like this teen kind of soap opera drama, total like rip off of Dawson's Creek. Huge in the late 90s, early 2000s, or I guess early 2000s. And I took this DVD set and I took every interesting image from it, recorded every interesting image, chopped it together into a music video for this pop song, basically. And that was my first editing project.
Mm.
Did it for free, and just it's on YouTube. But so then it's like, okay, what can I do next? What can I do next? Now that guy was the roadie for a metal band, a three-piece female metal band out of Brooklyn called Mortals. And at this time, I was kind of getting into metal, and I was like, "Oh, let me work with you again." And he shot a bunch of footage when he was on tour with them. It wasn't a lot of footage, and he said, "Do a tour video." And I'm like, okay. So I just got all this like amateur, like handheld camera, really bad audio recording, just like completely horrendous. And I cut it together into a tour video. And because I was the editor, the president of the record label sent me their album like a month before it came out so I could use their music in the video. So then I felt like, oh my goodness, like this is professional stuff. Like I'm working with a band. I've got like advanced release music. And I was like, oh, awesome. I'm in that world. This is great. And it just became like, okay, keep picking up those gigs. And then my sister Leah found I guess it was a Craigslist ad. Someone needed someone to read books on tape. And she said, "Oh, you should take this job." And I went, "Okay." So I got a cheap microphone. It was probably an earlier generation of the one you're using. Is that a Snowball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I mean, this is like, goodness gracious, 15 years ago. Yeah, so I got one of those, and it turned out that the books the guy wanted me to read on tape were all about filmmaking. So what I would do is I would work a breakfast lunch double at this restaurant, come back, take a nap, read for 4 hours, send the MP3 files to this guy, go to bed. And it was like, wash, rinse, repeat for almost a year. I read like 50 books about filmmaking, special effects, all that stuff. And then every chance I got, I was going out drinking, going out trying to figure out who I am as an artist, creative kind of thing. Uh, and really not getting anywhere. Because all those little kind of gigs were all so kind of amateur. They were getting me used to the process, getting me used to kind of what I wanted to do and being in that space, but not in any structured kind of way. And then, and once again, like trying to find a quest, trying to find something noble to do, trying to find a vision of masculinity that I wanted to aspire to, which I'd never seen in my life growing up. And then I had this moment where I wouldn't call it rock bottom. It was rock bottom for me, but it was just, okay, I'm not going to church. I'm not exercising. I've got a really bad screenplay I've written that's just terrible. I had a very kind screenwriter actually read it for me, and he just ripped it apart and just was basically like, Robert, you need to read a bunch of screenplays. You need to study storytelling and go back and read some more great books because like this is a complete mess. So I one late night, it was like 3 in the morning. I was intoxicated. I was eating a bunch of junk food, watching YouTube videos, and I saw Pumping Iron, the Arnold Schwarzenegger
Yeah.
docudrama. This is YouTube when it was only 10-minute videos, right? So
Yeah.
like 15 10-minute videos of Pumping Iron and I watched the entire thing and was like, "Oh, I need to get in the gym." I was like 23 at that point. And and then I started remembering because I mean, at the same time I'm listening to like really depressing music, like American blues, Mark Lanigan, like all this stuff that's like just makes you want to smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey. Like that,
Yeah.
all that music. That's all I was listening to. But then as soon as I started doing push-ups, I remembered like all the punk rock I listened to in high school, and I was like, oh, so I started breaking out all the punk rock I listened to. And then I started remembering like, oh, the Misfits, like that Skull T-shirt, like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to the Misfits. And then I was like, oh, I actually really like this. And then for some reason, Danzig, lead singer of the Misfits, was doing a show like an hour and a half drive from Philly. And I went, okay, it's not the Misfits, but it's the same lead singer. Like, I'm going to that show. And it was the Starland Ballroom in New Jersey. So before I had a smartphone, this is, like no GPS. Like, get lost on the way there. I've got like a six pack of six. Are they coming six? Red Bull? Do they come in six packs? I don't know, 4 pack, whatever. I'm like trying to like stay awake. And I go to that show, and the first like downward guitar stroke when Danzig came out on stage was so electric and so I'd never been to a metal show. I just got hit with this blast of raw power and went,
Mm.
oh, this is where it just started. That's just where it started. And suddenly did not care about partying, did not care about being depressed anymore. I was like, no, we're going to turn this into action. And it was just like, I'm going to the gym 4 days a week minimum. Like, I'm going crazy. I'm going to start eating properly. I'm going to learn how to cook my own food. I'm going to do that. Like, it just became this sort of cascade effect and just got really into metal, like super into metal, and was going to as many shows as I possibly could. And then just like blasting metal, going to the gym. And that felt in a way like going to church
Mm.
because I had music, I had something physical, I had a goal. Every time you go to a metal show, you're part of this like cathartic release that feels like you're in a community, even if you don't know anyone around you. You get into a mosh pit, and suddenly it's a group like ecstatic experience, right? Does it sound
Yeah.
religious? It is religious. Now, I mean, a lot of those bands are all like aggressively satanic imagery, but I ignored that because I was like, ah, it's fine. It's just music. It's fine. Just art. It's fine. Um, but in the meantime, I was still like trying to figure out how to write a screenplay, still trying to figure out how to maximize the quality of my voice. So I took voiceover classes. I started auditioning for voiceover work. I hired a teacher to get rid of my accent so I could have a neutral American accent.
Well,
It has slipped a lot in the last 2 years because I've only done like one voiceover in probably the last year and a half. But so just the kind of this frenetic energy, just like not knowing quite how to channel it. And that is sort of around the time because you're lifting, listening to metal, and then everything I wanted to read was in the same milieu. So, I read Old Man in the Sea again, and I'm like, I remember that being kind of manly. Like, okay, let's do that. Or like, I haven't watched Braveheart in a while. Let's watch that. And then suddenly your whole world becomes this sort of, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. If you have not engaged that part of your mind at all, and then at 23 decide it's time to, it feels like a part of your brain that had atrophied just opens up.
mm.
So I thought my life was basically over at 22, miserable and lovesick. But then suddenly I went, oh, wait, there's a whole other world I haven't even explored here. And it just becomes an obsession. It becomes kind of like, I mean, to be frank, a possession, because and I was just completely driven by that testosterone, basically. And then I finally got accepted to film school, and I was 29. 29? Yeah, 29. And so after all these years of slugging it out in restaurants, and at one point doing window restoration, on these kind of blue collar job sites where people will like tell you to your face that you suck. They'll just tell you to like get out of your. I mean, I'm trying to use appropriate language here. I don't know how much swearing is on your
You can curse.
podcast, but there's something about a South Philly carpenter telling you that he's going to ruin your day if you don't move your tools out of the way, and you believe him. You're like, oh, all right, okay, I guess I am in the way.
Yeah.
But you learn an awful lot about that kind of primal territory, which is fun too. Because I remember this one job site I was on in Camden, New Jersey. I was installing these chains. So they call the double hung windows. You have the windows, and then in the little pockets on the side of them, you'll have lead weights on chains, so you can raise and lower the windows like that kind of antique style. And this is my first day doing it, and apparently I was in someone's way. And he starts asking me all these questions, and I didn't know the answers. And he's in my face, he's got like a Marlboro Red hanging out of his mouth, and he's just like, "What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean?" And I just looked at him and said, "It's my first day on the job. I don't know shit." And he thought that was funny, laughed, and left me alone. And then suddenly he's like helping me out. It's like you just can't back down. Like they're trying to find out if you're gonna roll over.
Yeah.
Then they'll just keep pushing you. But if you stand up and just give it right back to them, they're like, "Oh, he's cool."
That's
But like the territorial thing, like I learned that in my late 20s. This is what happens when you're a quiet intellectual kid and you never have any confrontation. Um, so yeah, it was anyway. So I get into film school, and Ohio University, a very small master's program for filmmaking. And I have to give a lot of credit to Steve Ross, who was the president, or the dean rather, when I was there. Was he the dean? I can't remember his actual title. He was the head of the School of Film. But he had this integrated program where you had to take an acting class, so you knew what actors have to do. So you can't just be a filmmaker if you don't know what it's like to be directed and what an actor needs to give a good performance. And then we had to take, the normal classes, editing, cinematography. And he put us in these small groups where we couldn't choose our collaborators. So we had like a group of 5, and we had to work on each other's films. So it's like you might be in a situation where you don't get to choose who you're working with. How are you going to make it work? And then you got to take classes you wanted, but the whole program was incorporated in a way where the classes were kind of feeding each other. So by the time you got to it was a 3-year program, not a 2-year program. So by the time you got to your third, your thesis year, you had met the kind of people you wanted to collaborate with. You sort of figured out your creative identity, figured out what you wanted to do. And I took that full blast. Like I went so over the top with how much pressure I put on myself, how much work I was doing. But what it did is it taught me the structure of creativity. It's because you have to have rules. You can't just be creative. There are a million creative people in the world who never accomplish anything. Why not? It's because they don't have structure or discipline. So my editing professor, a man named Tom Hayes, taught us that when you're editing something, you do the roughest version possible, put it down. You just have to get it down in the editing system. It doesn't have to be good. Then you start editing to figure out what kind of story you want to tell. It can still be rough. Then you start figuring out what style you want the story to be. Then you start picking the better takes of the actors, like take 1, take 2. Then you start smoothing the cuts. Then you start adding. You don't add music until you've already got the story.
Mm.
Then you don't start doing the color correcting till the very end. So he showed us like this progressive sort of narrowing of the scope of what you're trying to do until you get to the story. And you don't get to the art point of filmmaking until like the very end.
Yeah.
You're a blue collar clocking in, clocking out, doing the nitty-gritty work the entire time. So he, kind of taught us this blue collar mentality to filmmaking, even though you're in art school. So you might be watching a bunch of black and white, French films that don't make sense unless you have a master's degree in gender studies, but you're going to learn the proper way to do this.
Yeah.
But what it really did for me is it clicked storytelling, not just editing. So then I started realizing, oh, I just need to write down the worst version of this story. Then I'm going to go in and be like, okay, what part of this story doesn't work? Get rid of it. Then go in and go, oh, I need to adjust my language here. I need to write that sentence a little bit differently. And then it's like, oh, is it a screenplay? Well, it has to match screenplay format. If I want a professional to read this, so then you have to learn that format. And then suddenly it becomes, oh, there's just a process here. Once I learn the process, I can be the most generic Marvel studio production, or I can be the most, Federico Fellini, dreamy surrealist or whatever. Like they all have to complete their projects. All of those people are hard workers. All those people clock in, put the time in, and get it done. And a lot of times they do it badly. And when you watch the early films or early art pieces of great artists, you start seeing like, oh, there's a development here. But they mastered the basics first. And one of the best notes I ever got from my editing professor was, it's clear that you know the rules. I encourage you to try breaking them now. And it was so liberating because I was like, wait, there's a right way, there's a right way, there's a right way. And he's like, yeah, there is. There is. And you can watch all the masters. You can watch Kurosawa, you can watch John Ford. I mean, any number of great, the Coen brothers is another great example. But they play by the rules. Even if their films are wacky, they still follow the same general principles of editing. So that got me to this point where when I finally did my thesis film, I felt like, oh, I know how to do this. Great. And then it became, okay, what stories do I want to tell? Who do I want to collaborate with? I know how to set up lights, so I can be useful on a film set. I know how to edit audio. I know what kind of equipment I want to use. And now I just got to find the right people to work with. And ever since I finished film school, that's just sort of how I approach projects. And lately, I mean, since moving to Nashville, I've been focusing way more on the writing side of things because it's a little bit slow right now for media. When the economy is not doing well, the media is the first thing to go, pretty much because people don't have discretionary income to spend on advertising or entertainment. But it's really been a blessing too, because it's really enabled me to focus in a way on storytelling that I wasn't able to focus before. The other thing is that, well, I mean, let's think, what's the best way to put this? If you're doing something entirely for yourself, the creativity is a process of discovery way more than construction. If you're doing something on commission, it's like they're giving you what they want and then you have to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
But if
Makes
it's
sense.
entirely creative, then it's all discovery until the point where you have to make it into a form that's, consumable by the rest of the population. So right now, the only commissions I'm doing are photography commissions. So someone's like, hey, I want to do family photos. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to dress? What's the location? How much time do you have? What time of day? What are you going for? Build that out, deliver it. Now there's creativity in there, like with the kind of shots you get, where you put the light. But it's still like, okay, I'm doing this for their goals. So being able to balance that's been kind of cool. But yeah, so that is the basics of my creative journey up to this point.
Okay. So I'll ask a couple of questions. First, you have five siblings or six?
I have five siblings.
And where do you rank? Like, what is the number? Are you a
So
middle
I'm the
child?
third.
You're the third. Cool.
So I have two older sisters, a younger sister, and two younger brothers.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I'm also, I have five siblings. I'm the fourth. So I thought it was a fun
Okay.
parallel. Uh, Next one. Is there an audiobook I might know you from? Because I'll give a bit of background.
Oh,
Like,
no, no.
no.
So those were all for private use.
Okay,
Those were for
okay.
private use.
Cool,
So
cool.
I'm still available if people want to hire me for private use. But I haven't done any that are you can find on Amazon now.
Yeah, because I was telling my wife, I always tell her who I have on the podcast, and I give very quick, uh, you know, descriptions of people that are really um almost cartoonish depictions of people. So I was like, yeah, I'm speaking to the audiobook guy today. And I didn't know that you've done audiobooks, but it was one of the first things that popped into my mind when I heard you speak.
Mm.
So yeah, it's cool. You should do more of that. I really feel like I've heard a voice that's so similar to yours, and I forget what I listened to. It might not even have been an audiobook, could have been like a documentary or something. I'm not sure.
Mm.
Um, anyway, one thing that I haven't discussed with you at all, two things actually, that might be part of your story somewhere. One is the whole this little corner phenomena with Peterson, Vervaeke, Van der Klei, and Peugeot that I'd like to get into. And the second one is psychedelics. If there's anything there for you to talk about. So either one, if you want to dig into either, it would be interesting.
Wow, there's an awful lot there. It's a very open-ended
It is,
discussion
and
point.
I will say one thing. Usually my questions would be more directed, but I think you're a really excellent storyteller, and I've really enjoyed your answer to the first, just the story. It's been like flow for me. So
Oh, okay.
you're doing something right for sure.
All right. Well, let's talk about meaning first. Back up a little bit. Okay. All right. So, personal experience, meaning structure, entirely Presbyterian theological structure, um, catechism, Calvinism, Western, well, not, well, yeah, Western Germanic Protestantism is basically my cultural heritage. So my family's mostly German, uh, and there's a rumor. I'm not sure if it's true or not. I mean, I was told that it was verified that I am related to Friedrich Nietzsche. Don't know if that's true or not. It would be cool, I guess, because he was the one philosopher I read in college where I was like, yeah, this
That's
guy,
cool.
which is, anyway. Um, One of the things I think that, like I told you, I always wanted to have like a nice stone chapel with stained glass windows. That like as a child, like I wanted to go to that church. Like that's the church I wanted to go to. Why didn't my church look like that? And then got to college, started studying Asia, and was like, look at all this. Like, if you look at Zen art in particular, like I really enjoy Japanese Zen art. Like even if you look at the brushstrokes of Miyamoto Musashi, the great swordsman, like he was a painter as well
Mm.
as being a writer. We talk about like a balanced creative. Like he was a warrior, greatest swordsman of all time, but he was also had beautiful paintings of nature, and he was a writer. So I got this impression in college that okay, it wasn't enough to be an intellectual. There had to be something physical to go with it, and that's why, in particular, Odysseus from the Odyssey, the Iliad, was one of the characters that I really kind of resonated with when I was reading that stuff because he was a military tactician. He was incredibly brilliant. He was really good at getting people to do what he wanted, but he was also a warrior. Like it wasn't enough to just be the brains. The things that are missing from the Protestant experience, ritual, um, incense, meditation, beauty, and let's be perfectly frank, it's aesthetically barren. I mean, it's a desert. Um, are found, you will find them in other places. If you are religious or spiritually minded at all and you don't find it in the tradition you grew up in, you're gonna find it somewhere else. So for me, it was like, okay, well, where do I find that kind of meditation or the sound of Gregorian chanting? Okay, well, these mantras that the Asians are doing, that sounds cool. You see a video of like Tibetan Buddhist monks and that kind of droning
Yeah, it's amazing.
vocalization is amazing, and you're just like, whoa, why don't we have that in the Presbyterian church I was raised in, which is supposedly the true version of Christianity. Um, so of course I'm like, how can I incorporate that into my life? You hear a sitar for the first time, and you're like, whoa, the Indians have it figured out, man. They've got the incense, they've got I mean, frankly, stunning artwork of the Indus Valley. That was another thing. I went to India the summer after my freshman year of college. And so after my, Protestant background's been decimated by
Yeah.
these postmodern perspectives on religion, I go to India where I see the most beautiful religious art I've ever seen in my life. Everywhere you go, I mean, the force of, well, let's be honest, there's a lot of terrible smells when you get off the plane in India, but then you also have like all the spices, all the incense. You've got, I remember walking in Delhi one time. It's like 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We're all, all these white people just like dying, just like chugging water, trying to survive. And you turn a corner, and there is a 6 foot tall statue, waist up, of Shiva. And you've got this monk on the floor pouring milk over a little statue of another god. And you're like, well, that seems like worship. Now, I mean, it's just aggressively pagan, obviously. But I'm just looking at it going like, my goodness, I've never seen anything like that. And it's just normal people. It's not in a grand temple. It's just on a street corner, down a little alley. And then 2 blocks over, you see a dead body in the alley.
Hmm.
And just this like intensity of like, suddenly we're clearly not in the proverbial Kansas. I got this really intense experience of just like not only aesthetic beauty, bright colors, intense smells, the heat, like just physically being in India hit me so hard. There was no comfort there. You were never comfortable unless you were in your hotel room. And even in your hotel room, you couldn't drink the water because you'd get sick.
Yeah.
So bottled water everywhere. But then, not only did we get to see the Taj Mahal, we got to go to Rishikesh, which is on the Ganges River. So you're seeing like cow carcasses floating down this disgusting river next to like just these amazingly beautiful monuments and religious images. So I come back from that, right, for my second year of undergrad college, and I'm just thinking, there's no way I'm going back to a Protestant church. You got to be kidding me. The East has it figured out. Now, I mean, the problem with that, when you take a couple minutes to look at it, is that like, yes, you have this, pantheon of all these deities, but a lot of them want to rip you apart. Like, I mean, let's look at like there's a water demon called Naga. You've got I'm gonna blank on a lot of this stuff. Ravana. If
Yeah.
you ever read the Mahabharata, or the Ramayana rather. But like epic stories of heroism and defeat and demons and dragons and like just like everything you want from like epic storytelling, and it's in a religion, and then you're like, wait, okay, so should I be Hindu? Dismissed that very quickly, but held on to the fact that like, okay, but I really like the music, I really like the ritual, I really like the imagery. And then I started studying Buddhism my second year in undergrad, and Bruce Lee. Oh, I need to read Bruce Lee. So I'm watching kung fu movies. I read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and the thing about Bruce Lee is that he basically, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do is great to read because it's his philosophy of unarmed combat, but he basically just ripped off the Tao Te Ching and a bunch of Buddhist texts and didn't quite cite them appropriately. So you think Bruce Lee came up with all of this? Like water can flow or it can crash. It's like, yeah, you're ripping off Lao Tzu. I mean, everyone attributes that to Bruce Lee, but he was just very well read. I mean, the guy read countless books. So, you start seeing, okay, well then I should probably read the Tao Te Ching. I should probably read the Dhammapada. I should probably read, some of the Hindu texts like the Bhagavad Gita. And so I was getting that aesthetic experience and that heroic intensity kind of storytelling from Asia. And I read the books they required me to read. So Outlaws of the Marsh was an old Chinese text I read. My professor was legally blind, so he needed someone to read books on tape for him. It's actually my first books on tape experience.
Ah, okay.
So I mean, this guy's reading list, excuse me, I had to read Confucius, Mencius, I had to read Outlaws of the Marsh, I had to read like Thomas Friedman, The Economist. I had to read
Yeah.
everything that my professor wanted to read. I had to read for him onto an old cassette tape recorder. So I was not only had the classes that I had to take, I was also reading everything my professor was reading.
That's actually amazing.
Yeah. And this is once again, this is my Muslim professor who is incredibly devout.
Yeah.
And he was our tour guide through India. So even though, he's showing us the Taj Mahal, he's also making sure to remind us, there's a mosque to the left and the right of the Taj Mahal that you don't see in the pretty photos. So it's like, and when we went to the Taj Mahal, he went and prayed in the mosque. So I started seeing that there was this religious ritual in his life next to an appreciation for other traditions. And I thought, okay, mythology, comparative mythology, this is what I need to really focus on. So I did. My mother's friend lent me a copy of Hero with a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell, great book. And I kind of fell into this ecumenism, this idea that all paths lead to God, like everyone's worshiping the same God, some in a more fractured way. Like in Hinduism, we've got, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So that's a trinity. It sounds familiar. Sounds an awful lot like yeah, it's a little, little different, but and I started kind of just finding ways to justify a lot of these other traditions. And then thinking, okay, well, if I was raised in India, then I'd probably be Hindu, probably be Buddhist. Why is Christianity any better than any of that? And that was kind of demoralizing for a while, but it also, when I accepted it, it led me into I think that you fall necessarily into the new age. You fall into new agey ideas as soon as you say, oh, I like something about this tradition. I like something about this tradition. Why can't that all be part of my tradition? And then I started reading Jung. I read a bunch of Jung and started really getting into that kind of whole side of things. Now, it wasn't until much later that I realized, and I might be getting ahead of myself at this point, because actually, let me back up. We'll return to that, Lucas.
Yeah.
Comparative mythology, fascinating. The amount of stories in there that you can crib from, you start realizing that every great book you've read follows the pattern from a religious tradition. There are no new stories, structurally speaking. There are always going to be new stories because we always have to tell stories in different ways for, modern people, modern audiences. But you can find the pattern of any popular film or novel somewhere else. And the more you understand the earliest versions of those, the better.
Mm.
Now, you can apply that to different parts of your life. So, okay, you have a favorite bodybuilder. All right. Pick an influencer today. I don't know who's big today, but
One of the most famous ones right now is Chris Bumstead.
Chris Bumstead. Okay, great example. And you want to do everything Chris Bumstead does, and you're like, okay, I'm inspired by this guy, 5-time classic physique, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're following everything this guy does, but what you really should be doing is looking up who his influences are
Mm.
and studying his heroes. Like, don't start at Bumstead, go to who he admires. That's where you find out the essence of what he values. And if you go to his influences, you will become your own person. You won't become a carbon copy of Chris Bumstead.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking about that as it relates to music. I'm into all these modern metal bands. And what are they doing? All they're saying is, I wanted to be Motorhead, Slayer, or Black Sabbath. That's it. Okay, so you got to just go back to, and then, suddenly start realizing how like everything the Black Sabbath did just gets chopped up and twisted and turned into whatever they're calling metal these days. And then you go to Tony Iommi, and you're like, okay, who did he listen to? Oh, Willie Dixon. Then before you know it, you're back at the American blues, And if you understand the American blues and the South, then you can hear that everywhere. But that initial pattern, you have to get to the essence of something to understand its permutations. And I think that a lot of times we get stuck at the level, the surface level, where everything is moving quickly. And unless you get beneath the waves, beneath the chaos, you're not going to find the source, the roots of the things that we really value. Okay. So, and especially when you're younger, you get distracted by shiny things,
Mm.
noisy things, people demanding your attention. So, for the meaning thing, when you're in the new age kind of sphere, you pick and choose all of the spiritual kind of things that appeal to you. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of transcendental meditation. I'm going to have a modern image of Jesus or a cross somewhere in my room because I like the cross. You know, I'm still Christian. Jesus was a great teacher. That's what they always come back to. Oh, he was a great teacher, just like Muhammad, just like Siddhartha, you know, just like Lao Tzu. Great teacher. A lot of great teachers. You know, Jesus is just one of many great teachers. Okay. So you keep that, and then you're like, oh, I really like this elephant image of Ganesh, because Ganesh, he helps us with obstacles. A lot of obstacles in my life. I should put Ganesh on my wall. So got a little bit of Hinduism, got a little bit of Buddhism, got a little bit of Christianity. I really like the smell of sandalwood. So I'm going to start burning sandalwood incense over here. Okay, love Ravi Shankar. Going to get some sitar music right over here. Awesome, we're good. And then suddenly you've built this personal religion that feels religious. You've got all the aesthetics. You've got a quasi-ritual practice. Your friend makes dream catchers, so you put a dream catcher on your rearview mirror in your car, and voila, you are spiritual. And that's it. And it's lame. And not only is it lame, might be a little controversial to say that, it's a religion of one.
Mm.
Because you don't let anyone else, some people might like certain parts of that,
Yeah.
your little personal religion,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's just for you. And if it's just for you, none of it will challenge you. This is something I came to very recently. Because when you have all these different little traditions and different little stories you tell, even the story of your own life, it becomes a weird idol to your own idiosyncrasies. So I had a lot of, I was thinking about that quite a bit, going like, wait, if I'm looking for the right church, am I just looking for the church that's going to appeal to
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Yeah.
The service that I like?
Mm.
Am I going there just because it has stained glass windows and stone? Am I going there because I like the preacher? Am I going there because my friends go there? And then suddenly you find yourself in the same, I keep saying you, I'm depersonalizing it in a weird way. It's all me. I'm going to only speak for myself, Lucas. When you have this religion of one, people can look at it from the outside, but they're never going to be part of it. They're never going to sit down with you and meditate the same way you meditate. They're going to have a different aesthetic. They're going to go, I don't really like the Hindu thing. They're going to say like, oh, well, you know, the Inquisition, the Spanish, like, why do you have a cross in here? That's a symbol of oppression. And then suddenly, and if you're willing to go, yeah, I guess I really don't need the cross anymore. You know, I really value the lotus and the yin yang a little bit more than the cross. So I'll keep the yin yang, but not the cross. And then you just sort of get down to this watered down, you're back in the desert again because it's just trappings. There's no substance there. And I found myself at that point a number of times but I would always think back to my professor, um, Dr. Ali Nizamuddin is his name. He teaches in Illinois, I believe. But I remember thinking like, no matter what this guy is into, he always comes back to praying 5 times a day, you know, and he's family man. And, you know, he has his extended family living with him. The man is legally blind, but he's still like, you know, the head of the household, loves gangster rap from the 90s. I was like, okay, well, there's something here. So the meaning thing. All right, so 2016 comes around. Jordan Peterson goes on Rogan's podcast. And a lot of people are like, oh, great, you know, the whole gender dysphoria thing, trans athletes, and, you know, everyone's fixated on that. And then like 3/4 of the way through the podcast, he goes, I'm a deeply religious man. Do you know what the flood is really about? And I think I was like I was like meal prepping. I was like making chicken and broccoli. And he says that, and I just went, like, my ears perked up. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, what? Then he starts talking about Jung. And he starts talking about how like important the Bible is, and I was like, whoa, 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 and and then I listened to that whole episode like 3 times and went, who is this guy? Found some of his other videos, and this is like my first year of graduate school. So I had just come out of like the 8 or so years of the restaurant industry
Yeah.
ridiculousness. I'm trying to find my creative identity, and not only that, my religious identity, because I've cast off the kind of Protestant background. And then this guy's talking about Jung, and I was like, right, I read that guy. I'm gonna break that out again. Then suddenly it's like I gotta read some Jung again, and then it became like just absorbing every single thing that Peterson put out because it's so wild. I mean, it's hard to kind of convey how intense that was when it first happened if you were looking for anything like that, because he was presenting ideas that had been presented before, but not with such intensity. Like he was throwing them out there as if they were the most essential thing that you were going to learn.
Yeah.
And I got completely drawn into that because not only did it have that sort of, there was a novelty to it, but there was also a, wait, this matters. Something matters. It can't be dismissed as just theory. And then my, comparative mythology mind, of course, gets into that. And I'm like, oh, right, Joseph Campbell. So I start like rereading everything that I'd sort of just treated as just intellectual.
Hmm.
And then it became part of my writing process because I was about to write the script for my final film for my first year, a black and white 16 millimeter project. And I thought, I'm going to treat this as a creative exploration, not just making a film. So I sat down and tried to empty my mind, and it did not work at all. I had nothing. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm supposed to be a creative. I can't write a script. What's going on here? And I was outside. I went to go watch a UFC fight with an actor friend of mine. And I went outside to have a cigarette. And I saw this gorgeous, dark-skinned woman walk by with like big, beautiful eyes. And she stopped and said hi to my actor friend. And I'm just like, who is this? I'd met her before briefly. But I was just, it triggered a memory. And chit chat a little bit. And I said, and I thought, I had this feeling in my mind like, I'd like to put her in a film. So she was in the acting department. I was like, I got to get her on screen. Like she has to, I don't know how, but she's going to be on screen. And I said, oh, would you be willing to be in a film next semester? And she went, sure, find me on Facebook, and, we'll talk. I was like, okay, great. So I went back to my apartment and I remembered that 10 years previous, I'd had a dream and I'd written it down. And in this dream, I'm walking through a warehouse full of boxes, like crates. It's a dark warehouse. And much like the end of Indiana Jones, I don't know if you've seen the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where in the very end they're pushing through that warehouse, kind of like that, like dark. And I'm looking for something, and I turn a corner, and I see a woman with her back to me. She's sitting on a crate. Um, you know, I can't tell if she's naked or not, but I can tell she's not clothed from the waist up, and it's just her back. And she hears my footsteps, and she turns towards me without showing me her face. And I wake up. It was a very simple dream, but when I had, I mean, I'm sure if you've done any dream work, you know that there are some dreams where you go, whoa, okay,
Hmm.
that meant something.
Yeah.
Well, I had that dream right after I got back from India. I'd written it down and I didn't know what it meant. I saw this woman, this actress, and I thought, wait a minute, I need to go back to that dream and find out what it meant. So I made a film out of it. And the first draft, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, I drank like 10 IPAs and I was just wasted. And I just drunkenly wrote a first draft because I was still self-conscious about my writing. So in order
Hmm.
for me to not to be self-conscious, I had to get drunk and write a first draft. Came back the next day, had like half as many beers, wrote a second draft. Third draft, coffee. Figured it out. But it was entirely exploration of that dream. And what I realized 10 years later is that that dream was my anima
Mm.
inviting me to be an artist.
Mm.
It was an invitation to the creative life. And then I started reading about the anima and started reading, Jung again, and realized that like the image of the dark-haired woman in my particular dream is almost always an image of my creative spirit. Now that sounds very woo-woo, obviously. I'm sure it doesn't shock you, a man who's into the kind of stuff you're into.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I realized that my dreams were really valuable.
Yeah.
And then I started keeping a dream journal and started really paying attention to them. But it was a very strange, just making, I mean, the film, it's not my best work. It's actually on my website. But the experience of making that film made me realize that I really did want to be an artist and I did have something to say. And it was honest. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I showed the script to my professors and they're like, what is this? This makes no sense. This isn't a story. There's no dialogue. Like, what are you doing? I said, this is a film I'm making. I don't care. I'm making this film. And and the actress, Sana, she agreed to be in the film. And I waited till after we were done shooting to ask her out on a date. And I've now been with her for 7.5 years.
Wow. That's the
Yeah.
story.
So,
I'll say it's actually my favorite one that you because I watched the short stories, your short films
oh, you
before
did?
this.
Okay.
I actually like this one the most. So
Yeah.
it's
So
super cool.
she, quite literally, the woman of my dreams.
Wow.
How many people get to say that?
That's cool. People are like, how did you meet your girlfriend? It's like, yeah, Tinder or whatever.
No.
Sorry in a dream 10 years ago. That's
Yeah, it's so the meaning thing though. So I was really into that space, Peterson, and then Jonathan Pajot did it was so during the biblical series, the Pajot brothers did the background to the Abrahamic stories, and it's only
mm,
on YouTube. It's not in the actual podcast. And I thought, who are these guys? Who are these random guys? And I think Mathieu said something about how the Egyptians are always associated with bricks and with clay and sand. So you got like there's a combination of civilization, civilizational structure, and I'm extrapolating here, but also the sand part, like there's no life there, right? So you have death in a hierarchy of an oppressive structure, and then the Israelites are always represented with water. Okay, so you have, like Moses is tossed into the Nile River. And so, and I started thinking, wait a minute, okay, that makes sense. Like, we're not just telling the story, like everything around the description of those characters and those people is informing the character, not just what they say and do. And that really hit me because then it became okay in an image in a film. What's the character wearing that's saying something about them? What does their apartment say about them? What does the lighting say about them in this scene that has nothing to do with the script or the words on the page? And then I started getting this a much greater understanding of mise en scène, is what they say, the French term of how the set design matters, the lighting matters, the costumes matter. All of these things are telling you something about the character. And one of the films where this really clicked for me because so I took a class called Art of Editing, my second year of film school. And what Tom Hayes would have us do is we'd take a film, we'd pick a film that it had to be nominated for an Academy Award in editing or sound editing or something like that. We would upload a scene, two scenes, into an editing system. We had to pick a dialogue scene and a montage or action scene. And then we had to go cut point by cut point through the scene, get an image of the outgoing frame, an image of the incoming frame, put them next to each other, and then underneath we had to write down all of our observations about each image. And then what the juxtaposition tells the audience while they're watching unconsciously. So we had to look at what the lighting is, how big the shot is, is it a head shot, is it a medium shot, is it a wide shot? We had to transcribe the dialogue. Where does the cut point fall in the dialogue? Does it fall where there's a comma? Does it fall at the end of a sentence? Does it fall on a weird sound that they make? We had to write down the sound effects. We had to write down if there was music. And we had to do this for the entire scene. So it ends up being like an 80-page or more breakdown of these scenes, and I chose Fight Club.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there were two scenes I picked. So the one that my dialogue scene was when Tyler Durden and the narrator are making soap.
Mm.
The kiss on the hand scene. Okay.
Yeah. Oh
That
man.
was one scene. And then the other scene was the projector scene. Like, Tyler was a night guy. This is what he did.
Yeah.
So I broke down each of those scenes, cut point by cut point, and about like 80 hours into this project, because it was so much work. And for a while you're just going, this is the dumbest project ever. This is the dumbest project ever. I hate this class. Why is he making me do this? About 80 hours in, I'm breaking down the soap making scene, and I had what felt like a religious experience related to film because I realized during the scene where Tyler is has like the narrator on his knees and is going like, our fathers were our models for God, blah 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 blah. I realized that every cut point in that scene is designed to make the viewer either uncomfortable or comfortable or confused.
Mm.
So when you have, so they're called motion paths. So if you're watching something, okay, so say something's coming from this side of the frame and it comes across, okay? So that's going left to right. If something comes right to left, it's coming in this way. So what happens when you have this? When they collide?
Mm.
So if one image, one shot is moving to the left and then incoming shot is already moving to the right, you feel like you're getting hit.
Yeah.
If the incoming image is moving left to right and then the next image is moving left to right, you feel smooth. The image looks like it flows. So in that scene, while the narrator is resisting Tyler Durden, every cut is a collision. When he doesn't know and he's fighting, but he kind of wants to believe him, it alternates, colliding, agreeing, colliding, agreeing. At the end, when he gives up, they're all agreeing and smooth.
Ah.
And I just had this. It's like 2 in the morning. I've been staring at a computer screen for 5 hours, and I just went, and I mapped it out. I wish I still had. I'm actually going to redo it because I'm going to do a YouTube channel that actually breaks this kind of stuff down.
Cool.
But I did it with red and green dots, and I showed this map of how it was like red, 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 then red, green, red, green, red, green, and then green, green, green throughout that. And I saw like this is how filmmakers do it. This is the highest level of editing. And then I broke the rest of the scene down with like the narrator is always framed with pots and pans and kitchen domestic like feminine things behind him. Tyler, the background is always shattered, broken, chaotic.
Ah, yeah.
So you have chaos and order. The narrator's clothing is always gray. Tyler Durden's clothing is always brightly colored with like a lot of sharp angles. Just everything about that film is constructed so beautifully. Not only that, the unconscious is always associated with water. Tyler Durden is in a bathtub. He's walking through puddles. He's like wet. Like there's all these things where he's always around water,
Yeah.
and the narrator is always with something either dry or structured. I mean, like, so that's visionary filmmaking. Even if for most people it's like, cool, I want to start a fight club or I want to fight society, and they get the wrong message from that film, but uh, everything contributes. So then, okay, take that from art into your life. Okay? What clothing do I want to wear? How do I want my space to look? What in this environment makes me feel more the kind of active participant I want to be? Like there's a reason, I mean, the wall behind me has a lot of, it's got metal posters, Lord of the Rings, powerlifting, all kinds of stuff. I got like Conan the Barbarian up here. But when I come into this space, into my like studio space, I'm getting the aggressive energy. I'm getting the poetic energy. I'm getting the feeling of being surrounded by my creative heroes and feeling as though I want to aspire to something like that.
Mm.
If I'm in a cubicle and I've got a couple little things stapled to the walls around me and everything's gray with fluorescent lighting, I feel miserable. I feel like I have no identity. So then it just, that just started seeping into my life like everywhere. Then it became, oh, I don't want to just, like my physicality too becomes another thing where it's just like I want to be the kind of man who can lift heavy weights. I want to be the kind of man who can't be pushed over. I want to be the kind of man who will not be embarrassed to stand next to tough guys. Okay, what do you have to do to make that happen? You got to train martial arts. You got to get in a gym. You need to learn from tough guys. You need to learn from strong men. And then, okay, what kind of spiritual person do I want to be? Do I want to be religious? Who's a good example of a devout religious person? I should probably talk to them. I should probably spend more time around them. I should learn what drives them and what gives them meaning in their life. So then it became, well, I got to stop wasting time with this person over here. I got to stop wasting time over here. I got to stop watching TV that makes me feel numb. I need to stop reading trash about celebrities. I need to start getting into the essence of things that I care about. And suddenly it just becomes that all happened in the span of my time in film school while I had a ridiculous course load, while I'm trying to learn how to work with actors, while I'm falling in love with this actress I just cast in a film. And the fascinating thing, and this is where I really feel like if you are open, if your heart is open and you are seeking God, I feel like he will find ways to draw you in that you don't expect. And that's kind of what happened to me because I take Sana out for a drink. I'm like, oh, I want to get to know this lady that was just in my film. And I started talking about the Bible. I couldn't help myself. I started talking about the Old Testament. And I said, you ever hear of Solomon? And she goes, yeah, my father's name is Solomon. And I was like, wait, what? She goes, yeah. And I said, well, what's your background? And she goes, well, I'm Ethiopian and I was raised in the
Uh,
Ethiopian Orthodox Church. My grandfather was an Orthodox priest. And I was just like, what? So there's a lot of whiplash going on at this point because I was vaguely aware of a Russian church that was Orthodox. I was vaguely aware that the Greeks had something going on. Didn't know anything about Ethiopia at all. And then I just became obsessed. She started showing me, just stuff from her culture. I'd been to Ethiopian restaurants before. I knew that Haile Selassie was revered by the Rastafarians, but I didn't really know a whole lot about it.
yeah.
And then when I visited her family for the first time, there were religious icons all over the house. And there was like you could just see that the environment was religious. It was just like this is just our culture. It's just what we do. It's not something that we go visit at a church sometime. It's part of our daily life.
Yeah.
And when we first said grace before a meal, stood in a circle and they said the Lord's Prayer in Amharic, a language I don't understand, but I suddenly started getting the feeling like my Muslim professor gave, which was, this is what we do before meals. This is what we do before we leave the house. This is what we do when we pray. This is what we do when we have guests. And suddenly it became, oh, there's a whole bunch of ritual here built in that I never had growing up. So the first time I went to an Orthodox church it was in Nashville. And I told Sana that I really wanted to go. I'm like, I got to explore this. You watch enough Pajot videos, you're like,
Yeah.
he's always talking about
Yeah.
it. I gotta give it a shot. So I walked in and there's this over the iconostasis, there's this massive image of the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child, and her arms are wide open. And in that moment, I realized my little personal New Age religion doesn't welcome anyone in. It's all about me. And in here, even if I disagree with people, even if there are things I don't know, they're all being drawn towards God. Where mine is just validating my own ego and my own spiritual fixations. So I've been going to that church for about a year.
Mm.
And this upcoming weekend, I'm going to be enrolled as a catechumen in the church. And it's an ongoing process, of course. There's a lot about it that I find very frustrating. But like I mentioned earlier, if everything you choose is to your own taste, it can't transform you. So, oh, I don't feel like praying in the morning. Well, guess what? The Orthodox Christians pray in the morning. Okay, well, I guess I'll start praying in the morning. Then you start realizing, oh, that actually is a nice way to start the day. Oh, got to pray before bed. I'm too tired. Okay, pray before bed, because that's what we do. Okay, and then suddenly you realize that like that's an important part of getting you prepared to sleep. And then I've met people at the church with radically different personalities and backgrounds, and none of it negates what I've learned from other traditions. That's the other thing. Hmm, it doesn't flatten things, I think I would say.
Yeah.
So if you just look at the lives of the saints, you start realizing, okay, not only do we have the pious priest who was nonviolent and ended the gladiatorial games, okay, actually not sure if he was a priest or not, but anyway, we also have Saint Christopher, all right, who who was this just like vicious, brutal warrior who wanted to fight for whoever was the toughest, and at the end ends up submitting to Christ and carrying the Christ child. That's the story there. Just this past Sunday was the feast of Saint Nestor, who was he was a soldier who was told that he refused to participate in the pagan sacrifices, and his master was Demetrius, and Demetrius refused to participate in the pagan sacrifices. So they lost all of their wealth, they lost all their standing, and they were going to be executed. And they're going to execute them via gladiatorial combat. So Nestor has to get into this arena surrounded by spears, and he has to fight the champion of the Maximian. I can't remember the guy's name.
Mhm.
And Saint Nestor goes to Demetrius and says, "What do I do?" And he says, "You're going to fight, you're going to win, but then you're going to die. Like you're not gonna beat everything. You're going to win, but you're going to die for the Lord. You're going to be martyred, basically." And so he does. Like so, Saint Nestor goes in there, fights this guy, is victorious, and then gets executed. He gets martyred right after that. And like the priest is telling this story, and I'm just going, I never heard this in a Presbyterian church. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, and then there was an icon of Saint Nestor off to the side. So it's like you get this aesthetic thing, you get the stories, you get all just this, beautiful tradition. So one of the criticisms if I could be critical of Jung, who was a much more brilliant man than I, he was reacting in large part to Hitler, to Stalin, to what he saw as collectivism just rampaging across Europe. So at that time, he was thinking the individual matters more than anything else because this collective thing is going to kill all of us. So his writing moves in that direction of the individual, which I think led to his personal spirituality, which, the Red Book, if you want to go into that.
Yeah.
Um, So, although, yeah, that's valuable, even at the end of his life, I've got a book called C.G. Jung Speaking, which is like records of some of his speeches and conversations and stuff like that. And one of the last interviews he gave, the guy who interviewed him described him as being this old wizard sitting in a chair with, wearing these like rings and having a cane. And they all had vaguely occult looking things that had been modified to become Christian. And he would talk about them as, well, this is the this, and this, but I am a Christian. So
Mm.
even at the end of his life, he knew in some weird way that he was always aiming back towards Christ,
Yeah.
no matter how weird the occult stuff got. So I think that, yeah, and also, here's another thing, Jung's father was a Protestant minister.
Yeah.
So you go back to that, and it suddenly becomes like, well, yeah, I did exactly what he did, not to his academic intellectual level, but you start realizing that, yeah, I think that especially in America, I mean, I'm not quite sure what it's like over in Europe. There's a lot more old buildings in Europe
Yeah.
than we have over here.
Yeah.
But the meaning thing, to bring it back to your initial question, I think that most of the people being drawn to that are really desperate for a meaningful, embodied experience. That's really what it comes down to. And that starts with personal responsibility, which is why Jordan Peterson's Clean Your Room struck such a chord. And then it goes into, well, how does that relationship with my family? How's that relationship with my community? Is it an actual community or just a collection of people in a particular category with a racial component, or a religious component. How do we really gather together? And the Muslims have Ramadan. During Ramadan, every Muslim's fasting. During Lent, every Catholic's fast. Well, they should be fasting. Every Orthodox should be fasting.
Yeah.
And you start realizing like this is how community actually is built. So that's sort of how I got to this point with the whole thing. Now we can talk about psychedelics if you want, unless you have some some questions about the essay
So
I just delivered to you.
that no, that was amazing. Let me think what is something that I might want to pull out. Jung was a big influence on me as well. The critique that I heard on him um, was that he deifies the unconscious, so he turns the unconscious into God. Um, it's almost he's got a Gnostic tendency to him. Let's say that's the critique that I took, where I was like, okay, let me maybe back off a bit from that. But like you say, he's more brilliant than most any of us. So
He's a
there's
he's a he's a crossroads kind of guy.
yeah,
He's at the intersection of so many fascinating ideas. What I took most, I think, from reading Aeon was that I needed to get back to the Bible.
yeah,
Like I read Aeon, which I listened to your conversation with Emily, and I agree with her. Not everyone should read Aeon. It's a very. I read it during lockdown in Chicago, during the COVID lockdowns, which
yeah,
was probably not good because I wasn't seeing a whole lot of people. But all of his work led me back to the Bible, and that's valuable. Just the way that Peterson has led a lot of people back to the church and to the Bible. But yeah, if you deify the unconscious, you get back to a pagan perspective because the unconscious has all the demons and the nightmares in it too. So if all is psyche, then how do you have a value system of like what is highest and what is the best? And then you look at another thing that I think you have to do with any kind of big thinker is look at how their personal life is going.
yeah.
You have to look at
It's a big one.
how that because Jung had his affairs, he had mistresses,
Yeah,
who like lived at the house,
yeah. It's crazy.
and you look at it and go, okay, is that because his true self was not monogamous?
Yeah,
Does that mean that he shouldn't have pursued monogamy? Um, he also had the added benefit that his wife was the heiress to like the biggest, like most wealthy family in Switzerland. So
yeah,
it's like he was able to pursue these things on the strength of his wife's finances. And I mean, congratulations, Carl. That's great. I'm glad you lucked into that. But you start wondering, like, okay, if that guy was responsible for his own finances and supporting his entire family, would he have had the luxury of pursuing his passions, if you will, like carnal passions? And that's another thing that the I'm learning through the Orthodox Church is that you're trying to not be subject to your passions, whether it's lust, love of money, fancy food, alcohol, whatever. It's kind of a tempering of those things. And if you are focused on the psyche, the self, completeness of your individuation, it's ultimately selfish.
yeah,
Now, that can be part of it, but it has to be in a different hierarchy. And this is where I think Pajot's work comes in because the hierarchy is the most not the most important thing, but if you don't position what you have in the proper hierarchy, it'll become an idol or it'll act as a demon. So let's say you're powerlifting, okay, and you want to get your bench press up to 400. If the strength of your bench press is the most valuable thing, you're going to abuse your body with the calories you put into it, steroids, um, just catabolic stress, the amount of time you have to spend recovering. You're going to forget about other things in your life that are valuable for your own health, not to mention the health of other people around you. Can that be your highest point? It can be a point you're aiming towards, but it can't be the highest point. And it's the same thing with, lust for fame or um, I mean, just pick something. Financial stability can be an idol.
yeah,
that's one in particular I think that we're all kind of dealing with, especially if you're in a rough economy. It's like, if I can just get a better paycheck, if I can just make enough money, I'll be fine. And then you start realizing that that focus is leading to other things in your life kind of falling apart.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I always come back to Jung, but I do think that it's you can't swallow that guy whole, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but then that also, I think that's actually a good segue into the psychedelic discussion,
Mm.
because just like reading Aeon isn't for everybody. Um, I don't think psychedelics should be for everybody either. I think that they're incredibly dangerous, but also incredibly valuable. It's a really tough one to talk about. I would say I heard once, I can't remember who it was. They said once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And that was his way of saying, like, oh, I did psychedelics. I get it. Okay, there's a spiritual substructure to our material reality. I got it. There are angels and demons. Okay, done. I'm going to focus on the rest of my life now. And I really appreciated that perspective. And I think that the problem, and this is the whole re-enchantment thing, Pajot talks about,
Check, check, check.
is not just the good stuff, the
Sorry, I
bad
lost you
stuff
for a
too.
sec.
And
You're back? Check, check.
yeah, I'm here. Are you?
So the stuff that Peugeot talked about, and then you cut off. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the re-enchantment
Yeah.
that Pajot speaks of, you're not just letting in the good stuff, you're letting in the bad stuff too. It's all of it. So when you take a psychedelic, you're lowering the screen, you're opening the windows. Okay, that's why the psychedelic means, like, what does that mean? Like clearing of the psyche or something like that?
I
It's
think it's
something
like
about
expanding, mind expanding or something. I'm not sure.
right. So you're opening yourself to all of that, and if you have no anchor point, then you will believe whatever comes in. So the religious experiences of like cult leaders, that's a lot of it, is your personal psychedelic vision or religious experience that you are now going to give out to some people because you don't have a spiritual grounding. And I think the biggest thing, apart from letting in both the good and the bad and not being able to differentiate or discern, is that ego inflation is the next, it comes in so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, and this is the whole hippie thing in the 60s. Like, they all thought LSD is the way forward. Peace and love, all the sex you want. Everyone's going to be a community, peace and harmony. We're going to listen to these great tunes and we're going to have fun, right? And within a few short years, they all found a guru to follow.
Yeah.
They all found some cult leader. We saw very quickly that the Manson family happened, where it's like, oh, you get all these people with these great vibes, and then you just kind of like, let's guide them towards this end. You get the CIA with MK Ultra, messing around with that kind of stuff. And you start realizing, like, well, the biggest thing too, if you have a Christian worldview, is that demons operate on lies and deceit. So if you get a vision of the angel Gabriel coming down telling you to start a religion because all of the other people were wrong, come on, how do you know that's Gabriel? You
Mhm.
don't. You don't know what spiritual voices you're listening to because they're going to lie to you to get what they want. So if something is operating, like the whole idea of demons is operating on deceit. So why would you trust any voice you get from there? I remember one time my priest told me, if you ever get a vision of a saint or Jesus or Mary, ignore it. Ignore it. Because if you ignore it and they come back and demand to be seen after you've crossed yourself and prayed, then they might be real. But if someone comes up claiming to be a saint or claiming to be the Lord or claiming to be an angel, you got to ignore that. Because the odds that you are the most important person to talk to are very low. And when your ego is inflated because of psychedelics, you think you're very special because you
Mm.
feel connected to the spiritual realm. And I think that's the most dangerous thing. I mean, and I've also, some people their brain structure can't handle it, and they'd go off the deep end.
Yeah.
I've met more than one person who has just their spirituality is built entirely around psychedelics, and and from my perspective, I mean, if I can be so judgmental, they've
Yeah.
gone off the deep end. And, at that point, it's like, how are you determining what's good or bad? Are you determining it based on it makes me feel good, or I feel connected to God, therefore it is good? And that's just I think that a lot of what's valuable about the church is that there is a standard by which you judge those experiences. So, but I mean, the psychedelic thing, like, yeah, for some people need to be broken out of of things. I mean, it's like, I mean, I would be lying if I said that they haven't been valuable for me at different points in my life. But I can't. I don't want my kids doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want. I don't think they should be used in a clinical setting because I also feel like the same cult leaders, who use psychedelics on their followers, what's to stop a psychiatrist, from manipulating their patients in the same way?
Yeah.
You have to assume that there's going to be an altruistic medical professional, and that's dangerous. So yeah, they're tough, but it doesn't surprise me that the interest in them has come back with the meaning discussion, with the whole Peterson Pajot thing. Like it's definitely intertwined, but I don't think that there's a pharmacological solution to the meaning crisis.
No, it's trying to solve the problem of materialism with a material substance, which
Hmm.
is kind of ironic, but
Yeah,
um,
well, it's incestuous, is what it is.
yeah,
You have to be able to transcend that materialism.
yeah, yeah. No, I've had a very similar like the thing of picking up the phone and hanging up. Like as soon as I got out, I'm like never again. But so valuable. Like I
Hmm.
don't know where I'd be without it, but don't do it again. Just there was something telling me you're done. And then later I started to think like, no, but I should. Maybe I could go back. And then luckily never did, I think. I think it's what you say, it's some people need to be torn out of something, but
Hmm.
for most, it's probably not a great idea, especially if you're not fully going into it, like fully letting go. Like I'm thinking of Emily's image of Jonah, where he's saying to the people on a boat, like, throw me off, I'm the problem. He's letting go into chaos. If
Hmm.
you don't let go into chaos, but chaos like happens to you, that's when things start to go wrong, I think. So you need to face that darkness completely willingly. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I also think that the attitude towards anything that dramatic needs to be humility.
Yeah.
I think that if when you get torn out, you can get torn out of something through economic problems, family problems. Um, you can have catastrophes in your life that break you out of patterns in a way that aren't psychedelic. And I think that if you can deal with those situations in a productive way, they can be just as valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, it took like I told you earlier, pumping iron to break me out of depressed, alcohol abuse and just wallowing in self-despair. So, I mean, I didn't have to take a psychedelic to have that realization. That was just a very matter of fact, like, oh, I got to change the way I move through the world, and
Yeah.
that can build to other things, but then that can be taken too far. Like any gym bro you meet who obsessively talks about supplements and it's like as much as I appreciate people like Andrew Huberman and the people that are trying to the optimization guys, like Tim Ferriss is another one who I
Yeah.
appreciate, but it's like you're not allowing. There's a way to, I don't know. My whole like I followed a lot of those guys for a while, wanted to optimize, wanted to be productive, do all this stuff, and then I started realizing that like the child who played in the backyard with the sticks and wanted to be King Arthur, that I still am at heart, needs time to stare out the window at the trees,
Yeah. Absolutely.
needs to sit near some running water and just ponder things. Uh, needs to just like hold hands with my lady and not do anything. Needs to sleep in one morning because the pattern of light on the ceiling is so beautiful that I want to drink it in before I get up and attack the day.
Yeah.
And there are so many moments like that there, you can't have those moments of beauty and those moments where you're not obsessively thinking about the future. You need to have those in order to have a meaningful life. And this idea that like we can, once again, the surface, this frenetic productivity is going to save us. It's not. And I find that like the moments that I remember that are most meaningful for me in my relationships are almost always when it's quiet. It's always when it's quiet. It's never at a party. It's not usually at the gym. It'll be these quiet moments where we're talking about what we're working on, whether it's in our personal life or our creative life. And there's some mutual support there and there's honesty. And so like honest, quiet moments are so priceless. And I think that a lot of the that optimization drive and that like frenetic activity, productivity thing is because people are afraid to be quiet.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's why, oh, transcendental meditation will make me quiet. So can you see how like this is all sort of leading, it leads back to the religious. It always comes back to the religious. I think we ultimately are all religious. That's
Yeah.
another one of Jung's things that I really do believe.
Me too.
But but yeah, I don't know. That's another thing too I wanted to bring up because I'm thinking about it because I gave you the Cliff's Notes version of my journey. But finding out that you're in the kind of physical fitness gym space, I think is important. In 2015, before I got into film school, I saw a YouTube video from the Arnold Strongman Classic, and it's the at the time it would either have World's Strongest Man or the Arnold Strongman Classic. Excuse me. And these guys are giants, like literal giants, like 6'5", 400 pounds, lifting a 272-pound dumbbell overhead with one hand. And the way this video was edited just made it seem so epic. And I remember I watched it over and over and over and just went, I have to go. I got to go see this. Like you got to be kidding me. And at the time I was studying opera. Um, studying. I was taking opera classes, let's say that. And was working at a restaurant trying to figure out how to write, didn't I was still in that kind of confused sort of zone, doing basically bodybuilding workouts, like nothing crazy. I didn't really know a whole lot about powerlifting. And I went on a pilgrimage. That's what it felt like. I'm going to take 4 days off from work and I'm going to travel to Columbus, Ohio to see giants. All right.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was a pilgrimage for me because my professor, like, you have to go to Mecca if you're Muslim. You have to make a pilgrimage to the holy city. I remember thinking that was really cool. Or, a lot of Orthodox will go to Mount Athos. And it's like, okay, oh, there are pilgrimages. Okay. Well, I'm not making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Okay. So I go to Columbus and I got into the convention center. And as soon as the strongman competition started, I got this seat right near the corner of the stage. And Hafthor Bjornsson from, Game of
Yeah.
Thrones walks out, and I'm just like, you just you're slack-jawed when you see these guys. And then I watched the whole competition, deadlifting 800 pounds, like doing the 1,000-pound yoke walk, like all this stuff. And I went, oh, I'm never training like a bodybuilder again. Like this is the real thing. And there was this thing called the animal cage, actually right behind me. That's the picture from that,
Yeah.
where these athletes for animal they're in a cage and they just power lift all day. And you can just go up to this cage and watch these guys just deadlifting, benching, and squatting. And seeing that level of intensity and that level of athletic, you know, performance, whether it's, steroids or not, that's always comes up in the conversation. Even with all of that aside,
Yeah.
those heights of human achievement, when you see them in person, make you realize, like, it helps set you in the hierarchy of where you are. You're like, okay, this is the pinnacle. Where am I? Am I doing what I could be doing to maximize something? So I became, oh, lifting is not about looking good. It's about being strong. I should be focusing on being strong. So then I started powerlifting, found another gym, stopped going to a fitness center, went to an actual gym, Iron Sport, in right outside of Philly, and they had Atlas stones. They had the Atlas stones. They had the logs. They had all the strongman stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not a very big guy, but I'm surrounded by big guys. And then it became, oh, if I'm surrounded by big guys, I will be closer to being a big guy than I was at a fitness center in the middle of the city. So then I learned how to do the strongman events and the powerlifting, and then it became like, okay, I don't feel embarrassed standing next to these bigger dudes. And that all started because I went on a pilgrimage,
Yeah.
you know? Now, someone might say, "Oh, you just did a little road trip to watch a sporting event." Okay, but the religious significance of it, if you want to put it in religious terms, like, no, I went on a pilgrimage to see some giants and the strongest men who have ever lived in person, and that was meaningful for me at that point in the fitness journey. And then it wasn't until much later, actually, it was after COVID lockdowns, I realized that it wasn't enough to be strong. You had to be able to fight. So then it becomes, okay, where's the closest MMA gym? If I can't defend myself, if I'm going to be helpless if someone attacks me or the people I love, then what kind of man am I? So then, got to learn jujitsu. Got to start taking Muay Thai. Got to be humbled every day you go to the gym and understand that if you keep going and you keep being humbled, you will get better. You will be more competent. You'll be closer to the man you looked up to when you were reading King Arthur as a kid. And the more I talk about this, because it's funny, I talked to my girlfriend about this quite a bit. She's seen so much of this, the last almost 10 years of this process, is that, like, yeah, it's difficult. It's not fun. It would be nice to just play video games and smoke weed and drink and get a paycheck from the government every month. But it's overall just a better way to live,
Yeah.
and I don't, for all the time I spend working on things, whether it's writing first thing in the morning, whether it's I'm getting to the gym 3 days a week, no matter what. I am making it to church Sunday morning, no matter how tired I am from working a dinner shift at the restaurant. This is a better way to live, and I don't regret it. And you find meaning in those other little things, and then you get to, like, the level of, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this to be of service to others,
Mm.
which is the message of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, then you're starting to see the medieval idea of chivalry. It becomes, I'm not doing this for me. Like, I'm doing this so that I can be of service to other people. And that puts you in, ideally, a state of humility and self-sacrifice, which is that's the Christian story. And yeah, it's really, you have to just bust that ego,
Yeah.
man. And that's so hard. It's so hard.
You have to
We
do
all
it again
struggle
and
with it.
again.
I'm sorry, say again.
You have to do it again and again.
You do
Like
it
it
every
keeps
day.
popping up. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, so it is cool though. Like, I feel like I'm finally at a point in my creative life where it's just matter of fact. I don't have to psych myself up to sit down at the writing desk.
Yeah.
I don't have to psych myself up to edit something. I don't have to psych myself up to go to the gym. I just do it. It doesn't have to be exciting. It's just, I like living as someone who is writing, doing photography, being creative. And when I go to the gym, I can get out of the creative space, and that renews my creative energy. Because if you're always in the creative space, you stagnate in a weird way. That's been my experience. I can only speak for myself. But I found in film school, every time didn't know what to do with a project or I was getting burned out, just go to the gym for an hour.
Yeah.
And I'd come right back and I'd be ready to go. And then these little things pop in. I'm like, oh, right, that's what Musashi said. You have to be able to paint. You have to be able to do calligraphy and be a sword master. It's not enough to be one or the other. And then Yeah, I just wish that that was part of the normal education system.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
wish that like high school had been okay, we're doing jujitsu, we're lifting, and then we're studying. You know what I mean? Like I wish that
yeah,
that was, I wish that's how things were. And it's too bad you have to do it by yourself these days. But now with the internet, I mean, you can build your own curriculum and you don't have to pay for it. So,
yeah. It's pretty miraculous. It sadly comes with all the negative potential as well of turning you into a dormant
yes.
person that just, has everything at their fingertips. But yeah, no, it's a beautiful. It's been really awesome to listen to you. To be honest, I'm gonna be listening back, and uh, I feel like there's just a lot to learn from someone that takes on life in a humble manner and learns so much. And I think you do a really good job of integrating that knowledge and being able to articulate. So a lot of the stuff that you're speaking about has been playing in my life, but it's not been, you know, said in these words with this clarity. So your time, me giving you giving me your time has been very valuable for me. So
Well,
thank you.
I hope that, I mean, you mentioned that you were kind of like in the intellectual side of things, you know, kind of like on a dead end, not a dead end
Yeah,
necessarily,
yeah,
but
yeah,
nothing. If I mean, if I could give you advice,
yeah,
which like, what do I know? I really do have to plead ignorance on a lot of this because I'm still figuring a lot of it out. A little quick story: when I was working for my brother-in-law restoring antique windows, and I'm really good at detail-oriented stuff, so I could like strip the paint off of something, sand it perfectly, and I would listen to these lectures, whether they were philosophy, theology, this, that, and the other. And I was listening to a podcast called Weird Studies,
yeah.
which I love. I love, even though half the time I'm just like, because they get really into the occult stuff, and I'm like, I'm just kind of over the whole occult thing. So every
Mm,
now and then I'm like, come on, dude. But they, Philip K. Dick, they had a couple Philip K. Dick episodes. One of them was The Owl in Daylight, which is a really good episode. And then another one was about his, after he had his religious experience, he wrote like thousands and thousands of pages trying to figure it out. And I got into this while sanding windows, got into this headspace, this intellectual, rational headspace of, okay, if there is one truth, then I should find that truth. Okay, but then Bruce Lee said, absorb what is useful, get rid of what isn't useful. Okay, well, if I'm determining what's useful, what if this church that claims to be the truth isn't useful? Then I should get rid of it. Okay, but without that, then how will I have a standard by which to judge the truth? And I started going in this weird circle,
yeah,
this rational intellectual circle of I can think my way through this. And I hit this brick wall and it was making me really depressed. And it wasn't until I prayed about it that I kind of, I didn't, it's not like I heard God speak to me, but I realized the like religious truth cannot be arrived at intellectually. I mean, some people will say that it can. I don't think it can. I think that it is not, it's not irrational, but it is unrational.
mm,
And by when I say unrational, I mean that it can be only grasped intuitively through experience and wisdom. I don't think you can think your way into it. And you know, if you are on the intellectual side of things and you've got a really powerful brain, if you stay in the brain, it
yeah,
will tear you apart. I really think that's what happened to Nietzsche. I think Nietzsche went insane and he was desperate for an embodied, epic, heroic life. And he's stuck in like 1800s Germany and had nothing and couldn't find it. Like he could not find it. And then Jung came along and Jung said, ah, I will not make the same mistake as Nietzsche. I will have a family. I will have a normal life. I will not stay in that headspace. And then you look where he, you know, his life, he did better than Nietzsche. But at the end, he said, I'm so glad I'm Jung and not a Jungian. Because even he could see that people that idolized him didn't have it right. That's my interpretation, at least.
yeah,
But so it's like, okay, like your path is not going to be like Carl Jung. Your path is not going to be like Nietzsche. Um, it's going to be unique to you. But yeah, the intellectual is always going to leave you feeling sterile. It's always going to
absolutely.
feel, it's always going to feel a little too clean. And I think G.K. Chesterton said, it's going to feel like being in a well-lit room.
Mm.
Lots of light in this room, but nothing happening.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that even the things I don't like about going to church or the things that I don't like about religion, it's still a better way to live. And I think that, I mean, my priest said something. There are certain truths you have to accept, even if you don't understand them. Which sounds to me like a cop out. I wasn't happy to hear that. I was really annoyed, actually. I was, are you kidding me, dude? You can't say that. You need to be able to perfectly explain the Trinity and the incarnation. And he just kind of went, nope,
No, I
no,
love
you have
that.
to accept it, and you have to see how that plays itself out in our life as Christians. And I was just like, miserable. But anyway, no, I really hope that is that kind of what you want for this channel? You want to just continue having conversations like this? I mean, do you have any creative projects you're working on?
No, not really. I never considered myself as creative because I just sucked at arts and crafts as a kid. But I'm noticing that just doing the podcast as a creative endeavor helps me scratch that itch, as well as doing some videos on the side sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, and I've just found it really valuable to speak to artists. So I don't know if that means that I should do something more with it, but I'm not sure what the medium is there. Um,
It might be the medium.
Might
I
be.
can't draw to save my life. Like you, I
Yeah,
mean, my handwriting is atrocious. I
mine as
can't
well.
paint. I can't. I mean, I'm decent with like I can read music. I played the piano for a little while, but I'm not a musician. It wasn't until I saw that I was good at curating other people's talents that filmmaking suddenly I was like, oh, that's what filmmaking is.
Yeah,
Get a good designer, get a good, like have the right actors. Like that's why directing is what I really want to do more of. At this point, I don't really have the resources to do it,
yeah,
but the process of directing, writing and directing is just it's magical is the only way I can really describe it. Like it is terrifying, it's difficult, it tears me up, but it also is the most rewarding thing. And I'm like really I just finished a screenplay and I sent it to a couple competitions and who knows if anything will happen with it. I'd love to produce it. Then I started writing a book. So I'm writing that book, then another screenplay, and just writing them, even if they don't see the light of day, is valuable. So I'm just like, I'm
yeah.
gonna keep doing it. I'm just gonna keep doing it.
Doing things for the sake of doing them, like I think that's true artistry when you make something and whether or not it gets to the light of the public, I think that's really cool. Like a
Yeah, you might
diary
just need to
entry.
find your medium.
Yeah.
I mean, you should try doing some creative writing if you haven't. See what
Yeah.
happens. And seriously, just a pen, like not a laptop. This is
Yeah.
something I've been doing recently, my own process. I got some really good paper and a fountain pen. When I sit down to write, I'm in a corner with no technology and I sit there and I write longhand. So I can't delete anything. So I can always go back and see my mistakes. I
Yeah.
just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Just like my editing professor told me, you got to get it down first before you can craft it. And ever since then, I haven't had writer's block. I just keep writing. It's amazing. Now, not everyone has that experience. I feel very fortunate to not suffer from writer's block, but that exploration can just like keep happening. Like, oh, this idea is cool. Ooh, and then your imagination will like spark up and follow that. Oh, maybe come back. Oh, go over here. We'll see. And then then like 2 hours have passed, and you're like, oh, I have other things to do today. All right, cool. I'll
That's
come back,
awesome.
desk. And then it's like it just kind of becomes fun. So,
Yeah. Man, I'm taking a lot of lessons from this talk. So thank you so much again. It's been really a pleasure.
oh yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad. I just think it's funny. When you first messaged me, I was like, who is this guy? Like, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be starting. So basically, I'm going to have a podcast. I'm developing it right now, doing film analysis with kind of the Fight Club thing I told you about,
Yeah.
breaking it down, and then interviewing people related to the films that I am discussing.
Cool.
So I'm hoping to have discussions with people who might have like um, expertise in the subject matter of the film, not necessarily the film itself, so that you get a broader understanding of kind of the ideas in the film we're discussing. So Yeah, I've talked to, I mean, I did talk to one. I'm really hoping to work with Derek Fiedler from the Symbolic World because he did a really wonderful essay on the film Arrival,
Ah,
the
yeah.
sci-fi film
Yeah,
Arrival,
it's a cool
and
one.
I'd love to collaborate with him. So I'm hoping to do that sometime in the future. So
Cool. I'll say one thing. I proposed to my wife after watching Fight Club. So if you ever meet the people, thank them. That's
that's fascinating because that whole movie is about unmediated masculine energy, and it finally gets mediated by a woman.
mm, yeah.
If it's not for that woman coming in, nothing happens. It's either self-destructive. Well, it's ultimately self-destructive. It's either impotent, the narrator, or self-destructive with Tyler Durden. It's not until he accepts Marla
Yeah.
that he can move forward. And she's presented with beautiful images of the anima, like these dream images. It's all, yeah, that's a whole nother discussion, man. I'm going to get into that with this video I'm working on. So keep
I'm
an eye out for
excited
that.
for what you're gonna produce, and I'm really excited if you're gonna get a YouTube channel because I think that's gonna be super cool. And I recommend people also the you do have a podcast with some episodes over the years. Uh,
So that one, I'm gonna, you probably are one of the, so I'm gonna actually pull that down. I'm pulling that
okay,
down, and it's gonna be like bonus episodes. I'm gonna kind of
cool.
just revisit it now and then. So, unfortunately, that's gonna be a dead link very soon in favor of
Well,
something new to come out. So
your Emily episode was awesome. So
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, she's
so,
great. I love
yeah,
her work. Yeah, she needs to have a bigger audience, I think.
I think so too.
So I mention every time someone talks about like Christian art, I'm like, oh, did you find Mud Hut illustration? Like you
Blinder,
should probably check it out.
it's true.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you so much. And have a lovely day. Good luck with all your projects, and know that I've learned a lot from you. And so keep going on this journey. It's beautiful.
All right. Take care, Lucas.
Thank you.